Tiny House Prepper.
Hi there everybody, I'm Bill.
And I'm Elizabeth with Tiny House Prepper.
We decided for this video to do something a little different.
You know, shake things up a little.
Yeah, so we decided to switch chairs.
You know, live dangerously.
Yeah, so I hope you can handle that. It's new and different for us.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I'm sitting in his chair and he's sitting in mine, so
Right.
we're going to go for it that way today. Yes.
So today we want to talk about testing your prepper system.
Yeah.
Are you a prepper? Do you have a plan, a system for your prepping, and is it actually written down? Or is it just sort of hit and miss, a little of this, a little of that?
We had earlier done a series, three videos in a series on how to prep. And we're going to actually have a link for that available at the end of this video, so you can look at those if you haven't seen them. So, you know, in terms of how to get set up with prepping.
Right, so if you don't actually have a written down plan that you've thought about, we really highly recommend doing that.
Yeah.
But what we want to talk about now today is testing your system.
Yeah.
If you have a plan and you've got some preps, do you have any holes in your system,
Yeah.
in your plan? The best way to discover those holes that you may not even consider that they're there is to test your system.
Yeah.
The way you do this is to do a test, do a drill. Pretend it's an emergency situation and apply whatever parameters you put on that emergency situation. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Right.
So there's really two things that you need to do in order to do this. One is, when do you start? And the other is, what scenario will you be dealing with?
Right. Right.
So when do you start? You don't want to decide on Thursday evening that you're going to start on Saturday morning, so you go down to the grocery store and stock up. It's got to be sudden and unexpected so that you don't have a time to go out and prepare for it, because that's the way a real emergency will happen.
That's right. They don't give you heads up.
Yeah. So there are several ways that you can do that. If you are computer savvy, much more than we are, because we can't figure out how to do this, but there might be some sort of way you can have the computer pick a totally random date to tell you when to start.
Yeah.
But for most of us, cut up a bunch of little pieces of paper, like 30 days, 30 of them or 60 of them, and put an X on one.
Yeah.
And put them in a bucket or something. And every morning when you go to work, or every evening when you sit down to dinner, take one of those out. And when you take one out, the one that has the X on it, that's when your emergency situation, your emergency test is going to start.
Yeah.
And you don't say, okay, we're going to start tomorrow morning. As soon as you pull it out, that's it. It starts right at that moment. Because many times a true emergency situation is going to happen like that. If the dollar crashes, you could just simply wake up in the morning and find all the banks closed and you don't have any advance notice.
Right.
So,
well, and we've actually, when I think back for us, we know, like, people know if a hurricane's coming in, but you don't know the extent of what's going to happen from it. And there are many different situations where, that can happen. Bill actually was, I was actually up at my sister's, but Bill was stuck for about 7 days with Hurricane Sandy, where there was no electricity at all. So it definitely tested the system.
right.
So it can, it can happen, and when it does happen, you don't necessarily get any forewarning at all.
Right. So another way you can decide when to start.
Pick a friend. Just have a friend or someone in your family, and say, can you just pick a date, and then just give me a quick phone call or text me or something, and tell me that now our emergency has started. And that way they pick the date, and then they can just let you know. That way you don't plan for it. That way you know that you're really looking at what would really happen, and it's the best way to find out if there's any gaps that you wish you had thought of earlier.
Right. And you can do it, you can tell the friend, or you can, if you're going to use the little pieces of paper that you put in a bucket, you can say sometime within the next 30 days or sometime within the next 90 days, whatever you decide.
Even within the next 2 weeks. Just something so that you don't know for sure when it's going to be.
Right, but if you're going to say sometime within the next 3 days, well, you know that's coming,
Yeah,
so you're going to plan.
That's too soon.
That's why I'm saying stretch it out a little bit.
Yeah.
So that you don't know exactly when it's going to happen.
Right.
So then that's how you find your start date. And then after you know that, then you want to, in advance, think of several different emergency scenarios and write them down. And then you can even number them. This is scenario 1, this is scenario 2, this is scenario 3.
Right.
And then as soon as you get, let's say you have 6 scenarios. As soon as you get that X that tells you we got to start, then you pick up a dice and you roll the dice. You roll the die.
I love his elaborate schemes. Go ahead.
And whatever number comes up on the die,
That's your scenario.
that's the scenario that you follow.
Right.
Or however you want to do it.
Yeah,
You know, just
yeah.
have them in a bucket, and you just reach in and pull one out. You know.
Right. Or have your friend pick a scenario.
Yeah.
You
Give
know.
him 6 scenarios, and he'll call you and say, "This is what's happening, and it starts now."
Right. Right.
So, okay. So, what kind of scenarios are we talking about? Well, she already mentioned one. You know, I was out of power for a week for Hurricane Sandy. It could be the same thing like with an ice storm. A big ice storm comes in, takes out a bunch of trees, takes out a bunch of power lines, and you might be out of power for anywhere from a day or two up to 10 days or something.
Yeah.
You know,
Depends on how quickly they can get all the work done.
depending on how much damage there is and how rural you are. That's another thing. You can plan on this test scenario for just 2 days if you want. You'll learn a lot from that. Or you can go for 2 weeks, you know, depending on how serious you are about it and how hardcore you are about it.
Right. Right. And what effect it would have on things.
Right.
Right.
But in this scenario, the ice storm, let's say it knocks out all the local power, so you don't have any power for a week and a half. But 2 miles down the road, there's power, so the grocery store is still open and they still got food. You can still buy gas and all that. You just don't have any electricity. See how you survive without any electricity for a while.
Yeah. Just simply turning the electricity off
Yeah.
is an incredible eye opener.
What you can
for
do,
so many
I'm sorry.
things.
What you can do is you go into your electric panel in your house and just turn off the main circuit breaker. It'll turn off all the powers of the house, so you can't even use it if you want to. If you look at your circuit breaker, you'll probably have 2 rows of circuit switches, and there'll be one at the top that'll go sideways. And it might say 100 on there, but it will probably say 200 because most houses have a 200 amp service. You just open the door, you just flip that switch. You don't need to be afraid of it. It's just like a switch on the wall. You just flip the switch. And if you flip that 200 amp circuit breaker, it'll turn off all the power in the whole house, and then you won't even be able to use it if you're tempted to, unless you decide to shut down your test.
Well, and you think, oh my goodness, I've got meat in the freezer, or what effect would this have if it was winter or if it was summer? And the reason we're saying this is we certainly don't want you to get yourself in a real bad situation. You aren't actually in the emergency, so we'll be real about it.
Yeah.
But it really is a good chance to stop and think, okay, now what am I going to do if a situation like this happens and I do have, a freezer full of stuff that I don't want to lose? In this case, you can at least go down and buy ice in that scenario, But it really will open your eyes quickly. Will you have water? Most people won't as soon as the electricity goes off, unless you've got like city water that's fed by gravity, or under pressure. Anyway, there's just a lot of different, around here most people have wells, and generally if you lose your electricity, you lose your water.
We lose electricity on a regular basis in the winter.
It does. It happens a lot.
But it's usually only for 12 hours or 24 hours. And a lot of people have generators that they can plug in their freezer and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That'll work for a day or 2 days or 3 days. But if it's out for a week and a half, you're going to run out of gasoline long before that. So it just helps you to identify, here's an area that we still need to do some work.
Right. Yeah. For instance, now we have said the stores are open, so somebody probably would go down and get water or get ice or whatever. But that is a very legitimate thing to think about in terms of heat or air conditioning, all sorts of different things. You're going to lose your electronics pretty quickly. Unless you've got some kind of solar on the house or something like that.
Right. I know solar is growing in popularity, but I think the majority of people still do not have it.
Right. So what will happen? Can you get a hold of somebody in an emergency if you don't have enough electricity to keep things charged up? There's things like that, depending on where you live. Okay. Another one that is not. It's not so much a matter of from this second on your electricity's off. But what if suddenly you lost your income, you lost your job? That's actually happened to us also. What is going to happen if you decide at one point to say, okay, I no longer have any income coming in? What are you going to do? And this one isn't so much of a, how do I light the candles and that kind of a thing. But that can really, really happen to people. And how set up are you for the main necessities of life if for some reason you simply lose a job or there's a severe illness? And so Bill lost all of his work, but thankfully I was still working. We lost, 60% of our income. And then when I had the stroke and I lost my income, by then Bill was starting to get back to work. So we're really grateful for that. But we've had twice now where our income was cut in half.
Right.
So that's one thing you could look at. We're trying to just spark ideas because you can come up with your own basic scenarios. A lot of people have different ones that they're most concerned about.
Another scenario that's much more serious, and this is kind of what we are planning for, is the collapse of the dollar. I believe that, politics aside, no matter who's in the White House, I don't see how our nation can possibly continue with the trillions of dollars of debt that we're carrying. What is it, 15 trillion, 16 trillion? I can't even keep up with it anymore. But it's not sustainable, and we truly believe that the crash of the dollar is probable. I don't know that it's imminent, but it's probable. And with the world economy all tied together, and with the most countries in the EU also riddled with debt, it could be a worldwide economic collapse. But even if it's not, even if it's just in the United States, in that case, you don't have any money to buy anything. There would be no food. You wouldn't be able to buy any gasoline.
Well, basically what would happen is the whatever money people had would become. This has happened to people in cultures before, but whatever money you have, things would be so hyperinflated, the money wouldn't be worth anything. I mean, eventually the stores are just going to empty out, or else you'd have no money to buy it.
Right.
So
you would not be able to buy those basic necessities of life. However, you might still have electricity.
Yeah.
You might still have sewer and water, at least for a few months until you can't pay for it. But
Yeah.
I have no idea what would happen there if the entire economy is based on that, whether electricity would continue. But see, this is where we're just kind of helping to spark some ideas where you can come up with your own scenarios.
Right.
From everything from a simple thing like just losing electricity for a few days, to a full-blown end-of-the-world scenario where everything is, anarchy in the streets. And anything in between, let your imagination be the guide of what scenarios you're going to choose.
And, as we talked about in the how to prep videos that I spoke of earlier, when it comes right down to it, especially in the winter for those of us that live in cold climates, think about the real biggies: shelter, water, food. Will we stay warm enough? Do we have water? I used to think water was the most important, and then we like shelter and food. But someone pointed out that, really your shelter is the most important, because if you're going to freeze or have some kind of terrible problem with exposure or overheat in some of the really hot climates without AC, that's seriously important. And then you got to have water. That's more important than food. But just think about what would happen to my main necessities, and then what would happen to my ability to be able to function comfortably. One thing Bill mentioned when he had lost the electricity for all that time was that he realized we needed to get some ideas together about laundry, because he really was wishing he could have done something more with laundry.
I was fine with everything else except for that one thing I discovered: I had no way to do laundry.
So yeah. So that, a lot of it boils down to just being very aware of what you need in your life. And one thing about a test like this is all of a sudden it'll make you notice.
Right.
Because there's so many things that we take for granted. And if something changed or happened, would I still be able to have that available? And would I be okay if I didn't? So, yep. So we know you'll come up with good ideas of your own.
So that's basically it. It's really quite simple. If you're a prepper, this will help you to hone your system to make sure that you plug all the holes, plug all the gaps. Mm-hmm. Just test it. Just decide some random time to start the scenario, and then pick one of, random of different scenarios that you come up with. And like I said, you can do it for 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months, whatever depends on how hardcore you are, I guess.
Right. Well, and so much of this depends on where you live, what your living circumstances are like. For someone to be able to go get groceries in the city and, if you don't have gas money, it's maybe a whole different thing for someone that lives far away from the grocery store and doesn't have gas money. You know, I mean, there's just a lot of different ways to look.
Yeah, that reminds me of another thing. You know, of course, you're not going to jeopardize your job, right? So
Oh, of course not.
if you decide on a scenario where there's no food or gasoline available, you still got to go to work. And if you're far enough away that you have to drive, then by all means, go buy gas and drive to work. But when you come home, don't go anywhere else. Just go to work and come home. Park your car, and then as soon as you're home, then it starts again. There's no gasoline available.
Yeah.
So if you want to go somewhere, you're going to have to walk or use a bicycle or something. Don't jeopardize your life for a test.
Of course not. Yeah, absolutely.
But make it as realistic as you possibly can.
And if nothing else, it'll help you realize, you know what, I can't let this happen now. I can't let all of my meats go bad in my freezer. But it really helps you realize, what would I do if this happened? Do I have anything in place to be able to do that? Do I have an idea for cooking it all? Or, you know what I mean? There's just all sorts of different things where even if you can't completely change that for very long, it'll make you much more aware of anything that you don't have available.
And something that you said when we were discussing this was, how many people will see this and understand what we're saying, but how many people will actually do it? How many people will actually do a full-blown test like this? And then you pointed out that even if they don't do the test, if they just think about it, think through it. If you walk around your house and just think, what would I do if there was no power?
Yeah.
Or what would I do if there was no food in the grocery store? Or, whatever.
Or if I had no more income.
Even if you just think about it in that sense, you can still come up with realize some holes that you have in your system that you didn't know before.
Right.
But by far the best way is to actually test it, because I'll guarantee you'll find something that you didn't think of.
Yeah, because all of a sudden you're really facing it. You're really having to deal with it.
Right.
Try actually having the electricity off in the evening and see how you and your family do. Are you set up properly for lighter candles? Do you have anything that you could do just to keep yourselves occupied? We play all sorts of different musical instruments, and I know one time we didn't have electricity for a while. We lit some candles, and all four of us were just playing music together, and it was so much fun. We could see just enough to see some music.
Four of us?
Yeah. I was on the on my piano. You were on the let's see. We had one on the flute and one on the other. Was all four of us were playing different instruments.
With the kids?
With the kids, yeah.
That was a while ago, huh?
Well, yeah. We're old.
That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. But
that's why I didn't know which four you were talking about.
Right, us and the kids. Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make with that is that sometimes by actually having the electricity off and facing an evening, you will notice things that you would like to be able to have ready so that you can make the situation so much better for yourself.
Right.
And this is just, when I think about Hurricane Sandy, and I think about all the people like in places like Staten Island that were apparently really suffering, my heart goes out to them. If they just maybe had some provision for having some water, having a little bit of food that was, planned on for emergencies. We can't live thinking that somebody is going to come from somewhere and rescue us. If it's a widespread emergency, there's just no way there's that kind of ability available to do that. And we can't expect that someone would be able to come along and take care of all that when there's a large area where people have lost electricity or some massive storm of some sort. So being prepared yourself, it would have saved a lot of people on that island a lot of uncomfortable times. Okay.
So there it is. I hope that helps. I hope we've sparked some ideas for you to be able to truly test your system and find out how you're doing.
Just getting some thinking going about it, and give it a try, and you can kind of make an adventure out of it.
Right.
So all right.
Okay.
Well, we have survived the experiment, I think, so far. The great chair experiment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, we're testing our system right now. We just we switched chairs and we're surviving.
Yeah, I think we are.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
it's so corny. I love it.
Thank you very much for watching, and God bless. And
God bless.
We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.